What is going on, guys? Ags here again with another After Effects intro tutorial. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we're going to be creating today. So this is a really nice, clean and simple intro, and what's interesting about this one is the fractal noise on the background. You can see we have those nice wavy lines on the background. We've also got a light ray coming off the text, and we also have the logo spinning in and bouncing into place. And also we're going to be learning how to use CC lens blur to create a realistic depth of field blur out to reveal the website at the end. So it's all fun today, so let's go ahead and get started. Just before I open up a new composition, I just want to show you that the different colours that you could have. Maybe we have a nice blue and green one here, also a blue and sort of reddy pink one, and also a green one. So you can see that there's loads of different colour variations that you could have. The possibilities are endless, and also you could colour the background stripes as well. So it's really up to you, and you can feel free to take it as far as you want. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to open up a new composition and call it master_tutorial, and then I'm going to come up to layer, new background or solid, and we're going to call it background. And then we're going to come up to our effects and presets, and we're going to type in ramp, and then I'm going to drag the ramp onto our background, and I'm going to change black to a nice yellow colour, and I'm going to change the white to a nice deep red. Then I'm going to change the linear ramp, the ramp shape, from linear to radial, and I'm going to drag the red just down a little bit. So already we have a really nice background. Just in the interest of time, I'm just going to paste the logo that was made earlier. If you're wondering what the font is called Code Bold and Code Light. So what we're going to do, we're going to select our logo and come up to layer, pre-compose, and we're going to name this pre-comp text pre-comp, like so. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to animate the text coming in. So what you want to do, you want to select your text pre-comp layer and make sure that it is a 3D layer by selecting this box here. And then what we want to do is come up to effects, and I think it's obsolete basic 3D, and what this gives us is a swivel and a tilt option. So you can see we can swivel that way and also tilt that way. So this is a really nice method of using sort of basic 3D. And what we're going to do, we're going to move to maybe 1 second on the timeline, and I'm going to hit the stopwatch on both swivel and tilt, and then I'm going to move to the start of the timeline, and I'm going to change swivel to plus 90 degrees, and I'm also going to change tilt to plus 90 degrees. So if we have a quick preview, you can see that's what we've got already, but we want to make it a little bit more dynamic, shall we say. So I've used this in our previous tutorial. So if you just come up to your browser of choice and type in bounce expression After Effects to Google, it will be the first website that pops up. And like I said, I've used this in a previous tutorial, and this is a really nice expression to create sort of bouncing effects without any keyframes. So what you want to do, you want to type in bounce expression After Effects, and then you want to come to the motion exchange, which is the first website, and then what you want to do, you want to come up to this section, which is the inertial bounce, and just copy this whole section. So just copy, and what we're going to do, we come over to our pre-comp, and we're going to hit U on the keyboard, and that's going to bring up all our keyframes. And I'm going to hold down Alt, and I'm going to select the swivel stopwatch, and that's going to allow me to copy the expression into the keyframe. So we just have to paste that expression that we just copied from the website, and then just click away. And I'm also going to do the same with the tilt. So once again, holding down Alt, click on the stopwatch, and then paste the expression. And if we do a RAM preview now, what you should see is a really nice bouncing effect like so. Just do a quick RAM preview to see how it looks. So there we go, you can see that we've created a really nice and easy bounce effect, and if you want more control over the bounciness, you can come in and change some of the parameters, but I'm not going to get into that today. So the next thing that we want to do is create these sort of light rays coming down from the text. So we can do that by copy and pasting our text pre-comp. We're going to move it underneath, and then what we're going to do is we're going to come up to effects, and we want blur and sharpen, and we want CC radial blur, and we're going to change the type from scratch to straight zoom. And if I just move forward in the timeline just so we can see what we're doing, and I'm going to change the amount to maybe 50, and I'm going to change the center. So currently the center is in the middle of the composition, but what we want is the light rays to be coming down, so we want to move the center to the top of the composition, or ideally above. So you can play around with this. If you want one maybe going up like so, you could have that too. And we're just going to drag it up like so. Maybe just decrease the amount to maybe 45. And I'm just going to scale down these two pre-comps like so. So you can see already we have a really nice bouncing logo with light rays coming in, and I'm going to rename this comp the light rays. And also if we hit T on the keyboard, that's going to bring up the opacity, and I'm going to set the opacity to 50 just so it's not so intense. So the next step is to add the floor. So you can see on the example we've got this nice white shadow on the floor. So to create that, all you have to do is come up to layer, new solid, and we're going to make it white, and we're going to call this floor large. And what we're going to do is make it a 3D layer by selecting the little 3D box here, and come down to transform, and X rotation we want it to be minus 90 degrees. And then what we're going to do is move it down on the X plane like so. Now if we double click on our floor object, so all you have to do is double click, and that opens up the floor. So what we can do now is, if I select the ellipse tool and double click, that's going to automatically add an ellipse for the floor that's going to mask it out. So if we go back to our selection tool and double click on the mask, what we can do is reshape this, and you just want to get a nice sort of thin oval shape like so. And then we're going to select our floor large and then hit F on the keyboard. That's going to bring up the mask feather, and we can change this to maybe 100. And if we come back to our composition, you can see we already have a nice floor, but that's a little bit too intense for the moment. So we're going to hit T on the keyboard and bring the opacity down to maybe 50. And what we're going to do, we're going to copy and paste this floor large and rename it floor small, and there we go. And if we double click on the floor small, what we can do is select the mask again and just scale it down, just so we have a smaller reflection or shadow. And if we hit the F on the keyboard, that's going to bring up the mask feather, and we're just going to lower the feather just because we've scaled it down a little bit. We don't need as much feather as we did before. So if you take a look, come back to our composition, and maybe with the floor small, if we hit T on the keyboard, we can increase the opacity, and maybe just decrease the large one just a little bit more. So there we go. And we could also maybe increase the feather on both of these, just so we don't get any hard edges. There we go. Now what I'm going to do now is create the background, which was created using fractal noise. So what I'm going to do is come up to Layer, New, Solid, the usual, and I'm going to call this fractal noise. And then I'm going to come up to Effects and Presets, and we want Noise and Grain and Fractal Noise. And then within Fractal Noise, what we want to do is drop down the Transform, uncheck Uniform Scaling, and then that allows us to scale the height and width individually. So what I'm going to do is scale the height really high and bring the width right down like so, and then I'm going to increase the contrast and lower the brightness. It could maybe do with scaling it up even more. And then what we're going to do is, with our fractal noise layer, we're going to hit W on the keyboard, and that's our rotation tool, and we're going to scale that, or rotate that 45 degrees, and then we're just going to resize it like so. And then we're going to come down to the transfer mode, and if you haven't got this, you just want to hit F4 on the keyboard, and that will bring up the layer modes. And we want to change the fractal noise from normal to, I think, screen will work pretty well. Yeah. And now what we want to do is we want to add a mask to this layer. So what we're going to do is select the ellipse tool, and then we're just going to draw with the fractal noise layer selected. We just want to draw a nice mask like so. And then just resize it. And then if we hit F on the keyboard, that's going to bring up the feather, and then we can feather this mask like so. Actually, if we, before we add the mask, if we pre-compose this by going up to Layer, Pre-compose, Fractal Noise, Comp, and now what we're going to do is mask the pre-comp. So hopefully when we add the feather now, okay, so you can see that we're getting a little bit of whiteness around the mask. So to stop that, all you want to do is come up to your fractal noise and then change the blending mode from normal to none, and that's going to get rid of that nasty white edge. And then what we can do is hit F on the keyboard and then increase the feather. And we might want to scale this down just a little bit. Like so. Now what you can do, you can come and change the contrast or the brightness to have it as bright or as dim as you want. And also at the moment you can see that it's static, and we want the lines to be moving. So to do that, all we're going to do is, if we select the evolution and we move to the start of the timeline and set a keyframe for the evolution, move to the end of the timeline, and we're going to change the revolutions to 3. And now you can see we have these nice animated lines in the background, which is all good. So the next step would be to create the blurring effect at the end, and that was created using CC lens blur, which is really cool for creating realistic depth of field sort of blurriness effects. So to do that, what we're going to do is select layer, no, adjustment layer, and then we're going to select layer, oh no, we're going to select effect, noise and, oh no, blur and sharpness, and then we want to come to lens blur. And what we want to do is, if we increase the iris radius, you can see that we get that really nice sort of depth of field, and there's loads of settings. You can increase the blade curvature and the specular brightness and all that fun stuff, but I'm just going to increase the iris radius. And also, if we zoom out a little bit, you can see we have this sort of weird thing going on in the background around the edges. To stop that, all you have to do is come over to lens blur and select repeat edge pixels, and that's going to get rid of that nastiness there, like so. Now what we're going to do, we're just going to animate the blur. So I'm going to set the radius back down to 0, and then around 3 seconds I'm going to set a keyframe by hitting the stopwatch on the iris radius, and then maybe move to 4 seconds, and then we're going to set this pretty high to maybe 60 something, maybe 65. So you can see that that gives a nice effective blur out. And then what we want it to do is to blur out and then show maybe your website or URL. So to do that, we're going to come up to layer, new text object, and we're just going to write www.website.com. And then we're just going to position this. We could bring up our title grid just to make sure we get it in the center. And now what we're going to do, we're going to animate the opacity of the website text. So just as this text starts to blur out, just as the logo starts to blur out, we want this website text to fade in. So if I select the website and then hit T on the keyboard, that's going to bring up the opacity, and I'm going to set it down to 0 and then hit the stopwatch, and that's going to add a keyframe, and then we move a bit further up and we're going to set it to 100%. And if we just do a quick RAM preview just to see how it's looking. So there we go, we get that really nice blurring effect, and then the website comes in, and that's looking pretty good. So I think that's pretty much it for today's lesson. Feel free to play around with the different colours, and like I said in the start, there's some really interesting different colours that you can get with this. So yeah, that pretty much wraps it up for today's tutorial. I really hope you enjoyed it and you learned something new. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, I really appreciate it. And also don't forget to comment, rate and subscribe. And I will see you again very soon in another video. So thanks for watching everyone. See you later.